Real leadership is about breaking down barriers and finding commonalities to complex problems. Well, hello, and welcome to another edition of the Art of Ronin Leadership podcast. This is Mike Howard, coming to you from my home, and our home, I should say, in Las Vegas, Nevada. And we are on February 28th, so we're on the cusp of a new month. It's amazing how fast this year is already going, and I hope that this podcast finds all of you well and happy and enjoying your life. We're very happy here in Nevada that the mask mandate has been lifted as of about a week or so ago. So it's great not to have to wear masks in public places, and it's hopefully it's a sign of good things to come when it comes to COVID. So again, hope all of you are doing very well and are healthy and are getting over this COVID issue. Before we get started, if you have liked the content so far in our podcast series, please hit the subscribe button on the screen, and we'd love for you to be receiving these podcasts on a regular basis. And if you have not done so, please pick up a copy of The Art of Ronin Leadership. And again, we've gotten some really great feedback. There are some folks that are looking to buy copies of this for their teams, for their training, and really are happy to do that and happy to accommodate you and your teams if you want. And so please engage with us. We're happy to even provide you with some discounts if you're going to buy in bulk for your teams. So again, thank you for the feedback so far on the book, on the podcast. Very positive. We've got some good things coming up ahead with some really good some guests. So we're really looking forward to engaging some other really talented people to come on the podcast and to talk about leadership. We may even, again, as we've done before, we've talked about relationships, and we've done some other kinds of podcasts. So we'll delve into some other fun areas as well. But again, this is a podcast on leadership primarily, and so that's what we're going to be talking about. So for today, I was thinking about what to talk about. And I might have mentioned this in previous podcasts, but if I haven't, I have a standing invitation with the Las Vegas Sun newspaper here, one of two major newspapers in the Las Vegas area, to do the occasional article, more of an opinion piece on things that are sort of uppermost in my mind. And one of the things that I wrote about recently was on this whole idea of discourse, or lack thereof, in today's society. Discourse to me is the ability to have meaningful discussions with people on any number of topics, and to be able to debate and really engage in the act of citizenry when it comes to engaging in some of the political issues of the day, whether it be race relations, economy, politics, business, what have you. And the gist of my column was that we have lost that art of discourse in this country. You look at Congress and the inability of the Democrats and the Republicans to engage meaningfully on any issue. They are so driven by ideology and the lack of civility within both parties, that it's just amazing to me they get anything done, and they rarely get anything done. Whatever the political issue is, Republicans take one stance because it's their ideology, and Democrats take the opposite because it's their ideology, and never the twain shall meet. And there was a time, and the way I wrote the article, I crafted the article for the paper, was there was a period of time in our society where you could still have, deep-rooted beliefs in certain issues, and have fierce discussions about those issues, but still be able to figure out a way to get to the the goal, right? Get to the end zone. Get to a place where you could find some commonality and get something done for the people of the country. Those days are gone now, and hopefully they'll come back. But right now, what we have people in politics who, no matter, even if you believe that the opposition party has some valid points in their political agenda, those are discarded. It's strictly you're voting on party lines, you're voting on party ideology, and usually it's too far left or too far right, but that's what you're going to follow. And we have lost that ability to have proper debate and discourse. Uh, I've mentioned this many times, both in the book as well as in talks that I've given, where I look back on those days of Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill, diametrically opposed individuals politically, but who could figure out a way to get a political agenda moved forward for the benefit of the American people. The late Senator Robert Dole from Kansas passed away not too long ago, who was a Republican, said that politics basically was about, not getting everything you want. All right. So you're never going to be able to get everything you want, but you get something, the opposition gets something, and so everybody is able to get something accomplished to move the agenda forward. Nowadays, it's about if I can't get everything I want in politics, or if I can't get everything I want in business, then that's it. Nothing gets done. And so part of what I want to talk about today is that we have lost that ability to have discourse in our society. Reasonable debate that leads to some kind of consensus building that we can move the agenda forward. And a lot of that stems to me from this this area that I like to talk about a lot called emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence is simply the ability to understand yourself, understand others in ways in which you are willing to entertain your own strengths and weaknesses, acknowledge others' strengths and weaknesses, and then kind of figure out, okay, how in that context, how do we get things moving ahead? How do we work together in a better fashion? And the reason why emotional intelligence is so important, I think, in this grand scheme of things, what we call discourse and debate and getting things done, is I look at when I was at Microsoft, and we were formulating our leadership team in the early days of global security. And over a period of time, I found people who I believed were going to be able to drive different lines of business in my organization. And they were very talented people, but not always working well in the sandbox, right? Not always playing well in the sandbox. And great subject matter experts in their areas, but not always very good at playing well with others, because very strong-willed individuals, and whether it was personal or professional or a little bit of both, there was friction going on. So we engaged in some training in emotional intelligence. And a great friend of mine, Mitch Shepard, who is still running, a couple of business entities. I met her through social media. I liked what she had to offer, and we engaged in several rounds of emotional intelligence training with her. And I can remember, and I talk about this in the book as well, because it was very meaningful to me and hopefully for my team, where we did an initial round where First, we had to fill out some paperwork, kind of talk about, I think, what we thought about our team and about ourselves and our own strengths and weaknesses. And then after the paperwork was done, we got together offsite, away from campus, our main campus, went to a hotel and rented a conference room, small conference room. And I remember the gist of the conversation or the session was, first my team gave me feedback on kind of things they thought I was doing well as things I could be better at. I remember one of the things I could be better at was being less subtle about giving directives and being more direct. Some people could get my subtleties and would get what I was trying to get at. Sorry, from a messaging basis, and others said, "Hey, look, boss, just tell us what you want us to do, or tell us if you think we're not doing the job, and just be very more direct about it." And so lessons learned. So, but then at that point, after I received my feedback, I was asked by Mitch to leave the room, and it was a better part of an hour. It felt like more than 2 hours, but I was right outside doing email, and the gist of it was the team themselves giving each other feedback. And I'm sure it was a fairly heated session at times. No one likes to be told, "Well, you're good at this, but you're not as good at doing this." And so the give and take back and forth, and then being able to be transparent and put it out there for the whole world or the team to see. And then I was brought back in, and I was given a sense of what the discussion was all about between the team members. And I could tell, just by the faces, that uh, it, it was an emotional session, but it helped to break down some barriers, and it helped to really allow team members to be honest with each other, with a moderator, to talk about things that they thought their teammates could be doing better, uh, to be better teammates. And we went through another session of this, but I think that was the nucleus of us getting together as a leadership team, being able to talk honestly with each other about things that we disagreed about without making it personal. Sometimes it got personal, but for the most part, we were able to engage and debate and talk to each other as human beings, frailties and all, which helped us to bond as a team to drive the strategies that we needed to drive to get the kind of growth that we experience in our global security organization. And obviously, the byproduct of that would be the successes that we made from a business standpoint, as well as from, I would say, an influence standpoint within the global security community, and how we were able to drive our technology strategy and be able to use that as a launching point for a lot of different things that I described in the book, and a lot of successes that we had. But it all came from that nugget of emotional intelligence and our ability to leverage that emotional intelligence in a very concrete and substantive fashion. And so the discourse that we are able to experience based off that emotional intelligence, right, helped us to be able to execute from a business standpoint, and helped us to build a really effective leadership team. So, from a leadership perspective, if you are a leader looking to build a team, a new team, or if you have a team that is perhaps dysfunctional to a certain extent, and I would also harken back to, me, I always like leadership books. Patrick Lencioni, one of the leadership gurus I respect and admire, and read all of his books, and my team did too, was The Five Dysfunctions of a Team. I would highly encourage you to read that, because that's another good, a helpful tool that you might be able to use in your leadership toolkit to look at teams that are dysfunctional. But I would say emotional intelligence is a big piece of that, and you need to look at that. And I just think that's at a micro level. Speaking of what my team and I went through in our transformation to go from a disparate group of subject matter experts who were really great at their job to a well-functioning team that didn't always agree with each other on everything, and that's a big part of this whole thing called debate and discourse. But we were able to talk things through, even when things got heated and personal, in a way that allowed us to eventually get to a common goal. And I think that's important, because if you can't get past the emotional issues, then you're never going to be able to get to the end goal, the end state, which is a solution, a common solution. And I think we're losing that ability. So I would say, please don't model what you see on TV with the talking heads or with our so-called political leaders. But I don't see a lot of leadership in politics nowadays. I see a lot of people in their own individual tribes with the speaking whatever the tribe speak is, whether it's GOP or whether it's the Democrats. There's really nothing there when it comes to real leadership. Real leadership is about breaking down barriers and finding commonalities to complex problems and being able to find that solution. And it all stems, to me, from that ability of having really good emotional intelligence. Knowing yourselves well enough that you know that you don't know everything. Knowing yourselves well enough to be willing to change a position. Right? Colin Powell used to always have one of his 13, principles of leadership that he talked about a lot in his life. One of them, I believe, said something like, "Don't let your ego get so close to your position that when your position falls, your ego goes with it." I think that's really perfect for what we're talking about here, right? The ability to change your position because you found out your position is not working. You see it in politics all the time. Some politician says, "We're going to go down this road," and find out that this road isn't working. But from a political context, you say it's working, and you make believe it's working in your public pronouncements, even though it's not working, because you're so dogmatic in your position, your ego is so wedded to that position that you're unwilling to acknowledge that you were wrong, right? Real leaders can acknowledge that they're wrong, that, I thought this was the way to go. But either other voices said, "Hey, boss, that's not the way to go. Let's change direction, and we'll tell you why." And you realize they're right. Or because circumstances that are taking place on the road that you've traveled show you that we need to take another route, right? But you're unwilling to do that. Real leaders are willing to make that change and to admit that, okay, that didn't work out so well, and let's go try with plan B. There's no shame in that, because if ultimately plan B is the right way to go politically or from a business perspective, then that's the way you should approach it, right? You're not being paid as a leader to know everything. You're being paid to drive and help formulate strategy, and you're being paid to motivate your team. You're being paid to take the hits when something goes south, and the higher ups are pissed off at your team. Well, you take the hits because you're the boss, and that's your team. You're being paid to do all those things, but you're not being paid to be like the great Oz that knows everything, because nobody can do that. But too many people put on a front. And you see it again. You see it on TV with politicians all the time. They're never able to admit when they've made a mistake. There's always an excuse. There's always some other aspect that the reporters don't know about, right? Or whoever's asking the question. That as opposed to you, the politician, just admitting, okay, we could have done it better. I could have thought about X instead of Y, and so we're looking at Y now. You never or rarely ever see that. Don't be that kind of leader. Be the kind of leader with the right emotional intelligence that helps you to make good decisions, great decisions with your team, to be able to engage in the proper discourse, the proper debate, the proper to and fro that allows the intellectual juices to flow, the opinions to flow, that helps you as a leader be able to make the right decision. Now, the other piece of that is that ultimately, another thing Colin Powell said is leadership is lonely. And so we're talking about discourse, emotional intelligence, give and take, debate. That's all very important. But just remember this, ultimately, you are the one that's responsible for calling ball, for making the decision, the critical decisions for your organization. And at the end of the day, your team is your team, and your job is to take their input, but you make the final decision, right? And if you believe the final decision should be one way, separate from either some of your team or what the rest of your team is saying, if you truly believe that, then you're going to have to call the ball on that. And you're going to have to make those critical decisions from a budget perspective, from a personnel perspective, from a business perspective, from a strategic perspective. You're going to have to make that decision. And you're going to have to stand on it. And if that decision falls, then you have to be able to make the adjustment to say, hey, I made the wrong decision. But a lot of the times, you'll probably make the right decision. But you are in charge, and you're going to have to make those kinds of decisions. So that's part of the mantle of leadership, and that's part of the things that you have to take into consideration as a leader. So I just want you to keep these things in mind. As leadership is never easy. It can be a lot of fun. It was for me as a leader, but there were a lot of headaches that come with leadership. But those are the things that you accept as being leadership. One of the things that really got me through a lot of hard times in leadership was when I would read a lot of these books from Lencioni, or read Colin Powell, or read Team of Rivals, which was about Lincoln, which I'll address in a second. Would give me inspiration, but also give me ideas about, how could I tweak the team? Let's read this book and let's try this, right? Let's try something different, or let's see if we can use this in our leadership toolkit to make our leaders better. That used to jazz me up, and that would encourage me to keep moving forward, even in the midst of whatever we were facing globally, whether it was a crisis issue or some business issue at home, or a budget issue, or what have you. It gave me good fuel, good positive energy to move forward. And I would say you should kind of look at what motivates you. What are the things that you can do when things get tough to push you forward? That's just one of the things. My wife and I recently saw a 3-part series on PBS on Lincoln. And if you get the chance to watch it, I'm sure you can find it on demand or streaming somewhere. It was really great. And Lincoln is one of the presidents I admire the most. I've studied him before. One of the books actually that I recommend to people is Lincoln on Leadership. And the author, I can't remember the author's name right off the bat, but look it up, Lincoln on Leadership. It's not a long read, sort of like my book. It's a smaller book, but it looks at Lincoln from leadership perspective and the things he did, especially during the Civil War years, and how his leadership can be modeled today in terms of the things that you as a leader are dealing with on a daily basis. But that's certainly something I looked at a lot when I was growing as a leader at Microsoft, and then became the CSO. Those are one of the few books I looked at, along with Colin Powell's books and some others, Patrick Lencioni, that gave me ideas, gave me energy, and gave me fuel to move forward, and I think helped me to help figure out how to formulate our team and our strategy that made it successful. But one of the things about Lincoln, another book, Team of Rivals, by Doris Kearns Goodwin, great historian, has written many books Actually was able to hear her speak at Microsoft one time. It was fascinating. But The Team of Rivals, if you have not read this book, you need to read it as a leader. And it really talks about how Lincoln, when he became president, assembled a cabinet. And that cabinet consisted of some people that were his rivals, that had been aligned against him politically, ran against him in office. And that included his attorney general, his secretary of state, as well as his, I believe I took some notes here also, his secretary of the treasury. And so really, it really talks about how Lincoln had such great emotional intelligence. Like, he knew himself, and he knew his flaws. He knew his strengths. And he certainly was a strong man, a strong leader, who had to make critical decisions, sometimes against the advice of some of his closest compatriots or generals or members of his cabinet. But he's smart enough to realize that he needed the advice of some of these folks that had been his rivals into his cabinet to make the decision-making process and the governance of the country as good as it could be. And that's somebody, think about it today. Can you imagine either a President Trump or a President Biden or whoever bringing in people from the opposite party into their cabinet because their skill sets, their talents, no matter what their political beliefs are, would lend themselves to making the governance of the country better? Think about that. How powerful is that, right? President Obama, I think, was the last one that actually practiced that. I know that Team of Rivals is one of President Obama's greatest books. And when he brought Hillary Clinton, who was obviously his political rival for the presidency, into the cabinet to become Secretary of State. Now, I think President Obama said that wasn't specifically because he had read the Team of Rivals that he did that, but I think he felt that Secretary Clinton would have been best for that role. And again, whatever you think about President Obama or Hillary Clinton politically, I find it fascinating that President Obama was willing to do that. And again, you don't find that in politics anywhere nowadays, and that's a shame. But Lincoln modeled it because Lincoln knew that was the best for the country. And ultimately, you as a leader have to make the decisions on your team, on your strategy, or what have you, based on what's best for whatever enterprise you're working for. If you're a government leader of some sort, then what's best for your organization and for the country? If you're a business leader of some sort, then what's best for your particular enterprise? Not what's best for you or just your team, but what's best for your organization and the enterprise as a whole. And so those are the critical decisions that you're going to have to make. So invest in emotional intelligence training. Get to understand yourself, your strengths and weaknesses well, and acknowledge them. Be very transparent about them with your team, and your team needs to be able to do the same thing. And it's not going to be easy. If you're not willing to invest in this kind of training, this kind of engagement with your team, you're never going to get to where you're going to be. You may have successes, but you'll leave a lot of dead bodies along the way, right? And you don't want that. Humans are always going to have egos. Humans will always, even within your own leadership team, you'll have disconnects with people within your leadership team because they don't like someone personally or what have you. That may or may not change. That's not your job. Your job, however, is to make sure your team is fighting fair in the sandbox. They're playing nice in the sandbox. They're not trying to backstab each other. They're not practicing being passive aggressive with each other. They're being honest with each other in terms of their feelings on a business issue, and they're debating fiercely but fairly, and they're willing to look at someone else's point of view because they know that the decisions they're making are really critical to the whole. And I think that's the heart of emotional intelligence. Invest in that. Learn how to debate and have proper discourse as a leader and with your team, so that you can come up with the best decisions that you possibly can for your particular enterprise, right? And then read. That's a big. I wasn't going to talk about that much, but read. Reading is critical. Great leaders are readers. I've heard that from many sources, and it's true. If you're not reading leadership books, if you're not reading biographies, if you're not reading, especially if you're actively working and leading, then you're doing a disservice. Because again, you're living in a vacuum. You can take the time to read, to expand your knowledge, and maybe come up with new ideas, right? We changed the whole tenor of how we did staff meetings within our organization based off of a book, again by Patrick Lencioni, called Death by Meeting. And the whole premise of the book was that meetings in most business settings are boring and non-productive. They're a mishmash of strategy, tactical, updates, and everything's mixed together, and a lot of times decisions aren't really made, or you have to have another meeting to make a decision when you could have done it at this meeting. So the premise was to break up the meetings, and so you would have, like what we ended up doing, we had a weekly sync up every Monday morning. It was together, but to save time, we made it virtual, where we would take about an hour or less, and each of us go over, my leadership team and I go over kind of what we're planning on doing that week. What are the main things that we're touching on that week? Just so that if one of my leaders said I'm doing something, and another part of my leadership team said, hey, we're talking to the same person on something else. Let's go talk and see how we're going to handle this. So you could sort of deconflict, force multiply, and make sure that we're all on the same page tactically for what's going on that week. And then throughout the month, we would carve out once a month, anywhere from 2 to 4 hours, depending on what we had, for just strategy issues. We would shelve the strategic issues for that one particular meeting. Then we could deep dive into the strategic issues and really delve into it and talk about it and chew on issues and come up with decisions on long-term strategy. And that worked for us. As opposed to just meetings where the typical meeting where you sit down, the boss says a few words, and then you go around the table and everybody gives an update on what they're doing. And then there may or may not be any decisions made. And that's it. Then you move on, right? And that's not, to me, that makes for a boring meeting, but it makes for a non-productive meeting. But by reading the book, we changed how we did meetings, and I think we made it more effective. So read, and it'll make you and your teams better. So that's all I have to talk about for today. I've been on this kick on discourse and emotional intelligence for a while. I think it's very important, which is the reason why I wrote the article. If any of you are interested in seeing the article, just ping me. I can send you the link on the article that I wrote for the Las Vegas Sun. But yeah, as leaders, just remember, discourse comes from proper emotional intelligence, which will then lead to a better functioning team, which will lead to better decision making and the right decisions for your team. So, as with all of our podcasts, please give us your feedback on how you like the content and things that we could do better. We certainly want your feedback. Again, please click on the subscribe button, and if you like it, tell your friends about this podcast. And also, if you have suggestions, either on people that you want us to or me to interview, or topics that you want me to look at, just ping me. Be happy to look at that and add that to our podcast. Again, if you get a chance, please pick a copy of book, The Art of Ronin Leadership, Strategy, Execution, and Sustained Success. Really proud of this book, and I think you'll get a lot out of your leadership journey by reading this book. So until next time, I'm wishing you health, and please be well, and look after your friends and your family, and we'll talk to you next time. We'll see you.